When I started making videos on my opinions of this coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic, um, a lot of times I will reference these old sci-fi movies that I remember as a child. Okay, and I brought up several of them. And what I've done is because people have asked, and some people have even given me the titles when I make a comment, titles of these movies. And I think I've come up with 6 movies, which we're going to call Koba's must-see pandemic movie review. Okay? And I'll review the movies. Most of them are quite old. I'm going to give you the year the original movie was released. That's the version you got to see. 2 or 3 of these have had a remake done. Okay? Some of them not quite long ago. Rollerball was one that had a remake done. Omega Man was another one. They had a movie with Denzel Washington, which was an excellent movie, but it's put in more of a modern time, in a modern context, and kind of misses what these older movies, way back then, I'm talking 1973, 71, 75, and there is one from 1965. Those are the years that these movies were released in the theaters. Okay. Looking back at almost 60 years, 55 years or something, these movies, okay, are bringing up things that are, and these were considered sci-fi movies, science fiction movies. These were fictitious films, sci-fi. This is Fantasyland. If you watch these movies, if you do watch the original versions and watch the whole things, you best have a few extra rolls of toilet paper, because how this sci-fi movie has become our everyday reality, you're going to shit your pants, okay? It's plain and simple. So let's go over the list. Okay, here's the list. This one I can never remember the name of the movie. But I remember Robert Duvall was in it. It's called THX 1138. It was released in 1971. Now, I haven't found the original film, but I found a cut, I think either on Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever. But again, THX 1138. You have to excuse my handwriting. This was set in the future where, I guess, basically, the police were robots, and when you had problems, you would go to like this booth with an ATM in there, and this machine would talk to you, and there was a video recording, and they tell you, stay calm, just take your medication, and dispense you pills. Give you a blast of Prozac or something. And sexual contact was against the law, and everything was enforced by these robot cops. So this is a pretty strange movie. I haven't seen it. I vaguely remember it. Okay? But this is like the stay at home. We'll get through this. Just take more of your nervous medication. Take a double, triple dose. You'll be all right. Do not contact other people. Do not disobey the orders. Stay at home. Kind of sounds familiar. Good one to watch. And that was released in 1971. Okay, again, futuristic view. Soylent Green. Soylent Green. Soylent Green, 1973. This is with Charlton Heston. I have found the movie on YouTube, and I was watching it today for the first time from its very beginning in many, over 40 years since I've seen this movie. This movie covers global warming, overcrowding, and another thing, I remember when this movie came out, like any of my father's friends or the people, the group of adults around there, when this movie came out, it created a stir. Because in this movie in the future, and we're only 2 years away, because the movie takes place in New York City in the year 2022, okay? And the thing that shocked people is when they go to buy food, only the super wealthy could buy food. What they were charging for the food is insane. But again, there's a government conspiracy, all kinds of other fun stuff, but a lot of problems we're dealing with now. Overcrowding, global warming, pollution, food shortages, things like that. Interesting movie. Doesn't really cover, these two don't cover a pandemic. Omega Man, another one. Not the one with Denzel Washington, the 1971 version with Charlton Heston. This is more or less a pandemic type thing where most people died or were mutated to these strange beings that could not come out other than at night. And we're trying to get Charlton Heston, who was an army scientist and held up, battling this and everyday things. This is more of a pandemic movie, something similar, COVID-19 doesn't mutate people, it just kills them. So there's a little bit of a difference. But again, Omega Man, the 1971 version. Rollerball, the 1975 edition, okay? This is the original one with James Caan. And this is where they had some bizarre form of roller derby or something, which was quite popular in the late 60s and early 70s, rollerball. A little bit more intense and people got killed while playing it. But what it was is the world was divided into corporations and how they settled. Instead of having wars, they would have this bizarre sporting event to settle their differences and come to terms on disagreements. Rollerball, that kind of shows it there. Not to be confused with the newer one. It kind of takes the global government and stuff. The new version takes that part out. That's what makes this movie interesting. Now, this one here, can't see it real good. The Satan Bug, 1965. I remember watching this on TV. This showed where they had a virulent flu-like or some kind of disease that was airborne that was developed at Fort Detrick in the lab, and somehow somebody stole this, and that's what they call it, the Satan Bug. Okay, you can find the trailer on YouTube, but I don't know about the movie. Somebody broke in, stole this weapon. It was a biological weapon, and was going to release it. So this movie's also classified as science fiction and a detective story. Then, somebody did mention this in a comment, the last one. The name of the movie is 1984. Okay, it was released in 1984 in England, and it is a movie based on a book written by Orwell. I think it's George Orwell. Yeah. So again, we use the term Orwellian. And again, this is a movie, 1984. It talks about the future and how the world is governed by one global government and what's done to people who think freely or go against the grain or try to challenge doctrine or what you're instructed to do. This is a movie about that. And that's kind of where the parallelisms are. But if you watch these movies, you'll see that there is a similarity on what's going on nowadays and what was in these movies. So that's my must-see old movie list. Sorry about the handwriting. I know you probably couldn't read some of it. I didn't realize that until I just got up here. But those are the films. They span from like 1965 to 1975. And they were a lot of political and important topics back at that time. I remember when I was young. There was another film that they showed me in Catholic school. It was called Future Shock. They made us watch this in the 7th and 8th grade. And it was a movie that dealt with a lot of things like race and things. And basically what that movie was more about is how all these things that were critical at the time in the 60s, okay, the equal rights movement and everything else, they said in the future you're going to be able to pick the color or race you want. You can go, science is going to advance to where you'll be genetically modified, to where being of a different race won't matter, because people will evolve into something else that they can choose to be other than that. And it goes into the psychology. See, that's why I say it's important to watch these movies that were made at the time. It goes into the psychology of what's creating this disharmony. Now, back 50, 60 years ago, yes, racial inequality was a totally different thing than it is today. It still exists in one shape or form, but not like it used to be 60 years ago. Okay? Same for religious indifference and other different things that 60 years ago socially, it was a big deal. Okay? And it's looked at different by our society, and it's dealt with differently nowadays than it was back then. Okay? And that's where these movies are important. But the very strange thing is, these movies were made, like I said, in the early 70s. And a lot of the things that they were concerned about discussing in that, watch the movie for yourself. Some of them are a reality and are happening today. So I hope everybody's hanging in there. We're getting these restrictions lifted from us, and things are looking somewhat better. But there's my movie list, and go at it. Stay tuned.